Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Part 5, Chapter 3. The church, brilliantly lighted, was crowded with people, principally women. Those who could not get inside were pushing up around the windows and elbowing each other as they strove for the best places. More than 20 carriages stood in a line in the street under the supervision of policemen. A police officer in brilliant uniform, unmindful of the cold, stood under the peristyle, where one after another the carriages left sometimes ladies in full dress, holding up their trains, now men taking off their hats as they entered the church. The lustres and candles burning before the images shed a flood of light on the golden iconostas in the red background, on the gilded chasing of the icons, the great silver candelabras, the censers, the choir banners, the steps of the pulpit, the old dingy missals, and the priestly robes. In the elegant crowd on the right side of the church, people dressed in uniforms, white neckties and satin, silk, and velvet robes, with flowers and gloves, were holding lively conversations in an undertone, and the murmur of their voices echoed strangely beneath the high, vaulted roof. Whenever the door opened with a plaintive creak, the murmurs ceased, and everybody turned around, hoping at last to see the bridal pair. But the door had already opened more than 10 times, and each time it proved to be some latecomer who was to join the group of invited guests, or some spectator who had been clever enough to deceive or elude the police officer. The friends and strangers had passed through every phase of waiting. At first they did not attach any importance to the delay. Then they began to turn around more frequently, wondering what could have happened. At last the relatives and invited guests assumed an air of indifference, as though they were absorbed in their conversation to conceal their uneasiness. The archdeacon, as though regretful of this time, every now and then gave an impatient cough which made the windows rattle. The singers, tired of waiting, were trying their voices in the choir. The priest sent now a sacristan, now a deacon, to find out when the bridal party should arrive, and appeared himself at one of the side doors in a lilac gown with an embroidered sash. Finally, a lady looked at her watch and said to one sitting next to her, "This is very strange." And immediately all the invited guests expressed their surprise and discontent. One of the ushers went to see what could have happened. During all this time, Kitty, in her white dress, long veil, and wreath of orange blossoms, was standing in the Sherbatskys' drawing-room with her sister, Madame Lvova, and her nuptial godmother, looking out the window, waiting in vain for the chauffeur to announce her lover's arrival at the church. Levin, meanwhile, in black trousers, without either vest or coat, was walking up and down his room at the hotel, opening the door every minute to look out the hall, but in the hall nothing was to be seen, and wringing his hands in despair, he would pour forth his complaints to Stepan Arkadyevitch, who was calmly smoking. "Did you ever see a man in such a horribly absurd situation?" "Da, abominable," said Stepan Arkadyevitch with his tranquil smile. "But be calm. They'll bring it right away." "No, hang it," said Levin with difficulty restraining his anger. "And these miserable open vests. Absolutely useless," he added, looking at the tumbled shirt bosom. "And what if my trunks have already gone?" he exclaimed, quite beside himself. "Well, you can wear mine. I might have done that in the first place. No good being absurd. Wait, it will all come out right." The fact was that when Levin began to dress, Kuzma, his old servant, was supposed to have taken out his dress coat, his vest, and all that was necessary. "But the shirt!" cried Levin. "You have your shirt on," replied Kuzma with an innocent smile. All his things had been taken up to Sherbatskys' house, whence they were to be sent to the railway station. The one that Levin had worn all day was not fit to put on, and besides, it did not go with his open vest. It would take too long to send to the Sherbatskys'. They sent out to buy one, but no shops were open. It was Sunday. A shirt was brought from Stepan Arkadyevitch's house. It was ridiculously broad and short. At last, in despair, he had to send to the Sherbatskys' to have his trunks opened. So while the people were waiting in the church, the unfortunate groom was ramping with despair up and down his room like a wild beast in a cage, and wondering what Kitty would think now. Finally, the guilty Kuzma rushed into the room, all out of breath, with the shirt in his hand. "I got there just in time, as they were carrying off the trunks," he exclaimed. Inside of 3 minutes, Levin rushed through the hall without daring to look at his watch for fear of increasing his agony of mind. "You can't change anything," said Stepan Arkadyevitch to him, following leisurely. "I told you it would all come out right."